All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our weekly town hall for Kentucky electronic visit verification. I appreciate you guys taking a little time out of your afternoons to spend some time with us here and update everyone on the progress that we're making with the Kentucky EVV project. Let me kind of skip on through and start things off with a little bit of housekeeping here. Obviously, if you've made it here, then you have the link to our webinar, so that's taken care of. But if in the event over the course of the presentation, if you were to lose connection or what have you, we do have a call-in number, as you can see on your screen. It should be included in the invitation that you received for the webinar this afternoon. If you need to call in from a phone, please feel free to do so. If you're having any trouble hearing or anything else, feel free to utilize the chat function within the Zoom platform. And one of our folks on our end, we're keeping an eye on that, and we'll try to help troubleshoot with you and get you back into the meeting so that you're hearing everything that is shared. Questions, please ask them. We're going to obviously be covering a fair amount of material today, and as we've continued to do throughout all of these town halls. But one of the most important parts of it is absolutely hearing from you guys and the questions that you are bringing. Given the volume of folks that we have here, we can't turn on everybody's mic, but what we can do is provide you in your Zoom platform the Q&A icon. Hopefully you guys can find that. And we do encourage you to submit questions. As I said, we've got folks from Therap, we've got folks from the state of Kentucky keeping an eye on that, and we'll try to address questions as they come in. But the other piece of this is if in the event that we're not able to get in and get you answers to everything that you put in there, we are compiling this information at the conclusion of all of our sessions, pulling them down and getting some formal answers created. And then we'll make those available to you publicly through our site. I'm going to get you the URL and everything for that as we continue to go through the presentation. But most importantly, we want you guys to feel encouraged to ask your questions. As I say every week, if you're thinking about that question, I guarantee you 5 or 10 other people are thinking about it as well. So don't be bashful. Please put that information in there and we will get to it. So with that out of the way, let's get to some formal introductions. Hopefully by now you guys know who I am. Again, my name is Jason Laws. I am with Therap Services. I am our Director of Quality of Data Initiatives, but more importantly, also one of our team leads for the Kentucky EVV project. As you've seen me over the last several weeks, I'm going to be sharing some introductory information around the KY project with EVV. Hopefully most of this stuff you're already going to know with what I share. But more importantly, I brought some friends with me today that I want you guys to hear from. As you can see on your screen, we have our COO, Mr. Justin Brocky, who is going to help address some questions with regards to our third-party vendors. That's really the topic of the day. So I suspect there will be a great deal of questions and information shared about the third-party onboarding process. So Justin's here to help with that. Dr. Beverly Bashimi, our Director of Government Relations, is going to do some presenting for us and go through some of the paperwork involved, with utilizing a third-party vendor. I know many of you guys have initiated this process already, but as you've reached out to us and indicated your intent to use a third-party vendor, then you have heard from Beverly and received a pile of documents, things like our business associate agreement, our end-user legal agreement, as well as our aggregator attestation. And Dr. Bashimi is going to tell us a little bit about those documents, give you some additional information about what to expect and what you guys need to do. She's also going to try to clarify any questions and really hit the high spots about that aggregator attestation to make sure that you guys have the information you need to complete the process. And then last but certainly not least is our senior support specialist, Sarah Christensen, who is here. Sarah is going to be serving kind of as the technical lead for our third-party vendors in the onboarding process. So after you get through those agreements with Beverly, Sarah will be the one actually working with you to get the testing done, to be able to share information from your chosen third-party vendor over to the aggregator. And so she's going to talk a little bit about the data elements that are going to be shared and what that process is going to look like. So we've got a great crowd of folks here to share a good deal of information. So with that, let's get started. Again, I already kind of did an overview of the agenda for today, but as a reminder, I'm going to hit the high spots on the project timelines. I don't want to take a ton of time here because I think everybody, for the most part, knows these things, but I like to do it every week, just in case we have some newbies here that are seeing some of this info for the first time. We're going to talk a little bit about the options you guys have with onboarding distinction between utilizing the Therap EVV platform or using a third-party vendor. So some of that basic info that hopefully you've all heard before, but really the bulk of the presentation today is going to focus on this third-party onboarding process and in preparation for that. As you continue to go through. And then, as always, we'll close out with a review of some of the frequently asked questions that we've been collecting over the course of the last several weeks with these town halls. And I'll share some of those that we've heard a great deal about, and also share with you some resources as to where you can find the answers to some of the questions that have been asked previously. So that's our plan for today. And so to start us off, again, just quick reminders around the overall project. As I hope everyone knows by now, Therap is the selected vendor for electronic visit verification for home health and ultimately for personal care services in the state of Kentucky. And on top of being the selected platform for the collection of EVV data, we are also the selected aggregator for EVV data here in the state. Obviously, you're going to hear a lot more about what that means when we start talking to Dr. Buscemi and to Sarah and Justin. It's part of that third-party onboarding process, but essentially what it means is you guys have choices when it comes to how you do EVV, and we very much appreciate the approach that the state of Kentucky has taken with their EVV project. We're blessed to have been selected by them to be your selected vendor so that you guys all have the Therap platform available to you should you choose to use it at no cost. But you also have the option, if you have an EVV vendor that you're already working with, you have the option of continuing to use that as long as that vendor can share data to the aggregator, which essentially is really the repository where all EVV data from the Therap platform or from other vendors comes together so that we can have that full data set that can then be used to validate claims. So those are kind of the two pieces you're going to hear a lot more about as we continue to go through the presentation today. Again, the go live date for home health for EVV here in Kentucky is 12/28/2023. Again, as I've mentioned the last couple of weeks, we're using that 12/28 date as opposed to the 1/1/24 date, which is what some of you guys may have initially heard. January 1st, 24 is the official date that everyone is required to be utilizing EVV, but we're using this 12/28 date a couple of days beforehand because everything will be done and available to you at that point. So you'll be able to get in there and start using the system and going live with it prior to the actual 1/1 deadline. A little timeline of kind of where we are. As you can see, we're just kind of around in the halfway point in terms of the timeline we've been sharing in our town halls. Again, we started with a lot of preparation with the state over the summer and into the early fall, and started kicking off our town hall in late September as an opportunity for information sharing with you guys. And right after that first town hall, we started with our onboarding process, through which we've been doing throughout the month of October and now into November. The process of which we're getting you guys as providers into the system. Those of you that are using the Therap EVV platform, getting your account set up and everything ready to roll with the collection of EVV data. And then on the other side, for you third-party vendors, getting you guys the necessary information to sign off on agreements, the specs associated with our API to share data with the aggregator. So that's really kind of the process that's now very much in full swing. And we've got, I know, certainly the vast majority of you guys now engaged in that process. And we'll continue to go through that through the month of November with the provision of the final training to the organizations and your staff on utilization of EVV, final testing and training in November and December with that go live date right before the new year. So in terms of those processes, again, I've already referenced this and you may be tired of hearing it by now because you hear it every week, but I do want to make sure that folks have a clear understanding of the options available to you. And those are the two that you see on the screen right here. Users in the state of Kentucky have the option of a state-provided platform, which is Therap Services, Therap's EVV platform, to be able to collect EVV data at no cost to you, so that you can collect that data. From that information, you have the option of billing should you choose to do so, or you can continue to bill for services in the way that you do now. Either way, you are going to be sending data from the Therap EVV platform over to the aggregator. And again, this is all made available to you as part of the state contract. Now, for others of you, and I know certainly on today's call, there's probably quite a few of you, given our primary topic that we're going to be discussing with third parties, but you do, as I said, have the option of utilizing a third-party vendor for EVV services, which essentially means if you have an existing EVV vendor or an EHR that you use within your organization that provides an EVV platform, you do have the option of continuing to use that. Obviously, that would be managed through you and at your cost through your private contract with the third-party vendor. You can certainly continue to do that, assuming they have the ability to meet the requirements to send data over via the API to our aggregator. And again, that process of certifying those third-party vendors is going to be the bulk of the conversation throughout the rest of the presentation. But again, hopefully by now, everybody's got a pretty clear picture of what these two options are, but certainly feel free to ask questions in the chat and we'll try to address them as they approach. Again, quickly to go through this so that you guys know the different buckets of activity that are going to be going on. Many of these are already, as I said, in full swing. We're going to continue to have these town halls like we have today as opportunities for information sharing, answering questions that you guys have. As you saw last week, we're also using them as training opportunities to share information of how things work within our application. You guys saw Nick and Shawnette last week go through the setup of accounts within Thera. But really, it's kind of a one-stop shop for you guys to come and get your questions answered and get resources provided about the EVV project. The onboarding piece is frankly, it's a little more personalized, right? That's where we're setting up time either one-on-one with our specialists who are going to be going through the setup of your Therap accounts if you use our EVV platform, or if you're using the third-party vendor, then you're going to get linked up with Beverly and Sarah to kind of walk through the agreements process, and then Sarah's going to get you through with getting connected to the aggregator. And then last but not least is kind of the more formal training that we're going to be doing. Once we get beyond just everything being set up within the system, okay, how do we actually get in there and use it? Providing training to your scheduling administrators, to your caregivers and direct support staff members on how to check in and check out and perform all the actions associated with EVV. Just as a heads up, and I'll mention it again later, our town hall next week is very much going to focus on this training piece in the interest of providing training of how those schedules are set up, how folks are checking in and checking out. So we certainly look forward to sharing that with you with some of our specialists next week as well. In terms of the provider onboarding process, I very, very much hope that all of you guys have initiated this process, but in the event that there continue to be some folks that have not initiated this, I do want to again share with you kind of how it works. Everyone by now should have received from Therap a job form that you see on your screen, and I've got a link here, I can show it to you live, where you're going to be going in and selecting whether or not you're using Therap's EVV platform, which is the option 3 here, or you're going to be using the third-party EVV, a third-party EVV vendor. So you're going to select one of these two. The two options up here are for current or existing Therap users, of which I don't think there are any or were any in the home health side. On our personal care side later, we'll probably get to that. But for the most part, we're going to be focusing on these two options. Once you select those options, you're going to be given a series of questions where you can submit some basic information about your organization. This will come to us when we receive it. We will also be sending you back a calendar invite so that you can pick a day and time for your one-on-one training with one of our specialists to really initiate that onboarding process. Again, many of you have already gone through this. And so for any of you that have not, we definitely encourage you to get that done immediately. We need to get that process started with everyone. Should you choose to utilize the third-party EVV vendor, then you're also going to get a series of questions from us that are a little bit different, that are more tailored to your particular circumstances, where we're going to ask more information about the vendor that you're working with and contact info, and we'll then get you into the funnel that we use to onboard our third-party vendors, which again is what the bulk of the conversation is going to be today. Let me get back to my main screen. Now, If any of you, for whatever reason, have not received an invitation to submit that data through that job form, please connect with us immediately, either through the KY support at therapservices.net, the email that you see on the screen, or you also have the option of reaching out to the state through the Medicaid public comment email address here at ky.gov that you see. Either way, by submitting through that, we can then follow up directly with you to make sure we get this process started. We do ask that if you're submitting information to either of these email addresses, to include the data that you see on your screen, which will help us more easily follow up with you and know exactly what we need to do to get you up and running, to include your name, obviously your contact information, the organization that you work with, as well as your provider number. Having all that information available will help us expedite the process of getting you up and rolling. Once you've gone in and submitted that, again, as we've talked about, there are a couple of processes that I'll briefly touch on. For those of you that would be using Therap's EVV platform, you're going to be immediately starting some onboarding calls with our staff that are focused largely around 2 areas, and then potentially a third area, which we'll talk about in a moment, kind of our optional billing services. But for all of you that are using Therap's EVV platform, the first 2 sections that you see on your screen, we're going to be working on with you. The first piece will be the setup of your Therap account, just creating the account itself, getting you guys set up as administrators in there, showing you how to do your basic logins, to create the programs and sites and locations for the services that are being delivered, getting your individuals into the system, as well as your users, which is what we refer to as your staff, getting them into the system and setting up the appropriate privileging so that they can see and do the things that they need to be able to see and do within the system. The next piece that we're going to be working with you on as part of the setup is the configuration of your account to your particular EVV services, meaning making sure the account reflects the actual services you provide, the payers that you work with, getting the authorizations into the system for the folks that you support with their particular services, so that we can create or you will be able to create the scheduled slots so that folks can check in and check out to provide those EVV services. The last piece, again, is optional, but part of what we offer at Therap is also a comprehensive billing system, so that not only do you collect EVV data and share it with the aggregator, which is part of the state and federal requirement, but you are also able to submit direct claims to Kentucky Medicaid and or your various MCOs. If you guys provide services under the MCOs, you can send that information into those payors through the Therap system if you choose to do so. It's being made available. So if you would like to utilize that, you let us know. We will also set up a particular training on that piece of setting up the billing side of things. So again, all of those options are available to you and part of the process for our EVV platform users. But the real focus of today's town hall is really what you see on your screen here. These are for those of you that intend to utilize either your current EHR or current EVV vendor to submit that information to the Therap aggregator, or you have a vendor that you're planning to work with on this. And so for those folks that indicate that, when you submit that information to us, and I think probably the overwhelming majority of you already have, you're going to be hearing from Beverly, who is going to share with you our end user legal agreements. She's going to be sharing with you our BAA, our business associate agreement, as well as the vendor attestation requirements, some basic information about what the vendors need to be able to share with the aggregator to meet requirements. She's obviously going to talk more about that process here in just a moment. Once that's done, you will then be in the hands of Sarah, who's going to help you all really navigate the specs associated with our aggregator and the API for sharing information, letting you know the data that needs to be shared, and kind of helping or providing you the technical leadership on getting that connection created, the testing completed. All of that is going to be the piece that she works with you on. So again, this is really the focus of the conversation today. And so with that, I am going to take this opportunity to turn you over, first of all, to Beverly, and I think Justin will assist in this as well, to discuss kind of the agreements and attestation piece for our third-party vendors. So Beverly, I see you have the screen.
Okay, first of all, can people see my screen and can people hear me?
We can.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. So I do want to reiterate, because I know we have a mixed group of folks on the call today. The next bit of this conversation really applies if you are using a third party or another entity other than TheraP to collect your EVV visit data and communicate that to the aggregator. And so this next piece is very different than if you are using TheraP to collect that data. So just to make sure everybody is clear, so if you're on this call and you're using TheraP, you're going to go through a different process. This is for those providers and third-party EVV vendors to let folks know what we're doing with that. So as Jason mentioned, many of you have already received a myriad of documents from me related to that third-party process. And so, excuse me. So there's been a little bit of question, and I saw at least a couple in the chat about what does it mean to be a third party. It means that you're not using TheraP to collect your EVV data. You're using someone else, and that other entity is communicating with the aggregator that is the TheraP aggregator. And so, and this involves sending third-party claims to MMIS, and it's a different system, as one of the previous slides that Jason indicated, that the provider is paying for as part of their EMR or another process. So there are 3 documents. I'm going to spend the most time today, and Justin's going to chime in because I am not the most technical person, so he can speak to the more technical aspects of it, but I'm going to spend the most time on the attestation today, which is a joint document that is signed not only by the service provider, but also by the EVV vendor. And it basically articulates what is needed in order to collect that data in a secure, HIPAA compliant way, and to communicate that data with the aggregator in order to bill for Medicaid. And then second from that is the third-party business associate agreement. And so that's the agreement between either the service provider or the EVV vendor and TheraP for us to be able to appropriately share information, communicate back and forth, etc. And then as Jason said a few minutes ago, there's also the aggregator agreement, which you may hear sometimes referred to as terms and conditions. But again, we're going to spend the most time on number 1 today. So all documents are sent via DocuSign. They are sent individually. So as the service provider, you'll get 3 sets of documents. As the EVV provider, you'll get 3 sets of documents. And so they come via DocuSign from me. So if you have any questions or anything like that, just let me know. We have several providers in Kentucky that are part of a larger, broader corporate umbrella that may have 2 or 3 legal entities under them. So I've already had several conversations with individual corporations and or providers to figure out if they need 1 set of documents that applies across the board to all of their legal entities and all of their locations, or if we have to break it down into several sets of documents. And that, quite frankly, depends on how that individual company is set up. So I know I've already had conversations with several of you. If you have any questions associated with that, please feel free to shoot me an email and we'll have a conversation to make sure we're getting you down the right path. And so we've had several providers request PDF versions because they need their legal department to review it, or they want, some other entity to review it. And so if you need those prior to signing and you haven't already asked for them and received them, again, feel free to shoot me an email and I'm happy to do that.
I would also point out, Beverly,
Sorry,
just there, that you should be able to, from the DocuSign, download and unsign, without having to sign it, be able to download a PDF there just on your own.
Okay. So if for some reason that technical difficulties and that doesn't work, I'm happy to shoot them via email. Several of you have already requested the technical specifications related to how a third-party EVV communicates with our aggregator. And so we are willing and have shared that. I will say that if we have EVV vendors on software vendors on the call, I would request, and I've gotten emails and this has been the response, to please communicate through the service provider. And that's not because we're being stingy or anything like that. We have to make sure that that service provider has indicated that they want to use ABC vendor as their EVV. So we do our communications through the service provider with the expectation that they would then share those specifications with their potential EVV vendor. Okay, So let's spend a few minutes talking about the first thing, which is the attestation. And this is, and Justin's going to chime in a lot during this, and we're going to kind of hit the highlights. But I do want to say
I was gonna
Go
kind of jump in right at the beginning just to prove you're right, Beverly. How about that?
Go ahead.
Because I've been asked in the past why we do this, and it's worth noting that as well as being the aggregator here, we are an EVV vendor anyway, just in general. So we submit data to about 35 different aggregators around the country. So if you are an EHR or an EVV vendor, we feel your pain on EVV and building interfaces and all that. We've tried to learn from being on the EVV side as opposed to the aggregator side of what we liked about aggregators and tried to make the best one we possibly could, and we think we've done reasonably well. But going right back to the very early days of EVV, and actually in the state of Ohio, which was one of the first states to open up a system to third-party vendors, and they discovered after it, and this is not to cast any doubt on anybody here, other than perhaps a few historical people in Hawaii, what they discovered after people had started in sending data was they weren't sending in real EVV data. They were basically fabricating it at the software end and then just populating the interface with fabricated data. And they went as far as you not only had to attest to the fact that you could do all this stuff that Beverly's going to go through, but you actually had to come and do a real life demo showing that your system was actually capturing real data in real time, because that's what the Cures Act is all about. So this is really us on behalf of the state of Kentucky doing the due diligence that the data we're receiving into our aggregator has been captured in accordance with the Cures Act. That's really what we're talking about. And there is always that possibility that later on we are effectively on behalf of the state of Kentucky might ask you to come in and say, hey, can we walk through this with you in person and see how that works. So again, think of this as us just doing our due diligence to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed in terms of the Cures Act. Back to you.
Okay. So the attestation has to be signed per legal entity, and it is signed by both the EVV vendor and the service provider. And so if you have multiple entities, you're going to get this several times. So hitting some of those highlights that Justin was just talking about as to why we've done this. So he kind of basically foreshadowed and hit this slide already. So, but allow users to participate with information. It allows us to make sure that the people accessing the data and how the data is transmitted is done so in an authorized way. Justin, is there anything else on that slide you haven't already hit?
Again, as with all of this stuff, what if you think about your EVV and you've got your core 6 elements of EVV, and that obviously, probably the most important of them are who is the caregiver and who is the individual, and you're going to make as it were, you're saying, yeah, we track them, we know whoever a given user is. We've got authentication in place. We know that is this given user who completed this particular visit, and we're comfortable with that. And again, as we go through and go look at the whole manipulation of data, you're saying you've got, and again, you guys have done this already. I'm quite sure. You've got to be able to prove that when you're sending, if you're sending the data to us, if you get audited afterwards, you are able to prove that, yes, this was this individual, yes, this was this member of staff, and they did this at this time. That's what it boils down to.
And in the actual document that you'll receive, these bullet points or numbers, they're provided in a lot more detail, but we didn't want to take the time today to go into that level of detail. But it's the specifics of how that data is communicated, that you're able to have that archive data to produce reports like Justin was just saying, in case you're audited and things like that. And so, but again, in the document that is provided, there's a higher level of detail of exactly what that means. One
Again,
aspect is,
what I would
go
say
ahead,
to this
Justin.
is we've had numbers of care providers who had a software system, and maybe it was a payroll system or another slightly adjunct to EHR and EVV, and said, yeah, you know, we can track stuff. We'll do that for you. But when it comes to actually, again, having background on the nature of service provision, EVV, and Medicaid billing, you're going to have to meet all those requirements. If those aren't things that you're doing already today, I suggest this is not the time. You know, given there's a fairly aggressive timeline to the go live, this may not be the time you want to learn that. This should be something that you're already experienced in.
And I will say that we have had several providers that have initially filled out that job form that Jason put up on the screen earlier, saying that they intended to use their existing EMR or their existing system. And then after reviewing and having some conversations, realized that that system could not do these components, or at least couldn't do them by January 1st. And so it's okay to do that evaluation and determine and switch gears to use TheraP as part of that. And then if at some point down the road that needs to change, we can have conversations about that. But we have had at least a handful of providers that have done exactly what Justin just indicated and realized that they weren't able to use their existing system. Justin, you want to talk just a little bit about what it means for the expansion of Commonwealth EVV program? Sure.
So basically what we're doing for December 28th, let's not say January 1st, is home health services, which is obviously a given set of services. By a similar time at the end of 2024, the current system that is there for personal care, that will transition, and those will have to come into our aggregator. And you know, the world's a changing place. The feds may well at some time, or the state of Kentucky could well at some time say there are now additional services that are required within EVV, or there are additional types of service authentication that are required as part of EVV. Again, folks that are doing EVV around the country will be aware of this sort of thing. All of a sudden, you know, there's a new requirement to deal with telehealth or something like that in there, and you've just got to deal with it. So you know, this is not a one and done. I think that's got to be the assumption on the part of the software vendor, is that this is good. You know, we've got really good requirements there. As Beverly said, we're happy to share it out. It is completely and utterly API based. So you know, if you've ever built a RESTful API, you're not going to have an awful lot of problems. We'll give you a whole Swagger thing to test against that is really nice, and it's all there in one package. If you've never built a RESTful API, you might not want this one to be your first.
Justin, you want me to talk about that, or you want to?
I'm happy to. The idea that, you know, you can deal with real life, and this again, I think, is having experience in this case in working with home health providers. Again, think about all the personal care providers that are going to be coming on board, or maybe your customer is a whole, you know, talking to the vendors out there. Maybe your customer is a home health provider, but you have to know that they are personal care, so you're going to need to do that as well next year. You've got to be aware of how things like identification. Again, people do one person. You can't say, yeah, I know it's that person because it's that address. That's not enough. You've got to be able to deal with all the vagaries that are there in real life. And like I say, if you've done this before, you know that as well. If you've done this before, you're collecting and verifying and dealing with issues like tasks and documentation, and those requirements again may well change over time. I think you've got to I would expect that requirements are going to change over time. There certainly will be more when we get to personal care.
Okay. So the visit verification and be able to flag if something looks unusual or if information or data is missing, to be able to communicate with the provider if something is incomplete or invalid. And any training associated with that third-party entity would be the responsibility of that third-party entity. But anything that happens to do with communicating with the TheraP aggregator, we will, of course, be responsible and take care of.
And again, the part of, I hope I'm making the right points to the right slides here, but you never know. Maybe the next slide has got my talking point for this one. Part of this is the idea of you're going to have to be able to perform logic on that visit, okay? And staff are going to do screwy things because that's what staff do. You know, the most common thing is staff are going to check in and forget to check out, okay? That's okay in some degree. We know that staff check in and will forget to check out. Again, that doesn't have to prevent you as an agency from getting paid for that visit. It doesn't prevent you as a software service from being able to submit that visit, but you have to do it properly, okay? You have to track the fact that an administrator at the agency had to go in and edit that visit, and why did they have to edit that visit? And those, the which visits were edited and why the visits were edited, that all has to be included in your submission to the aggregator. So if you're looking at your system at the moment and you're not sure how you would track that or how you would collect the fact that, wait a minute, there was a reason behind why I edited this, again, that there's going to be a lot for you to learn. Yeah. I would say at this stage in the game, you know, if this is going to be the first aggregator you've ever built an interface to, number one, I would actually say it's one of the better interfaces to build, if not the best, because it is a complete interface where everything goes. Again, it's a really well-defined RESTful interface. So again, if you like building those interfaces, you're going to find it very straightforward and very, very useful. But there is a lot of sort of subject matter expertise that you need to have about home health provision and about EVV in particular in order to do this. For mostly in that case, it's going to be around collecting the data rather than building the interface. So if you're not already collecting compliant data, again, we're happy to work with you. We're happy to, you know, give you some of our knowledge, if not our secret sauce. But if you've not collected actual EVV data before, you've probably got a fair bit of development to do on the EVV side before it comes to the submitting to an aggregator.
And you already talked to the next slide,
Yeah.
so I was just being
Yeah,
proactive.
I will a little bit again. And I'll happy to come back to some of the typed questions with things that the interface you're going to build, and as Beverly said, we're happy to send you the specs tomorrow, today, sort of thing. It is a RESTful API with JSON structure within it, within all the information. So as long as you've got that, we can, and again, we have up and running already at the moment a UAT context that you can build against and test against to make sure that everything that you are working with works the way you expect it to. If you are an EVV vendor and you work with multiple agencies, you will only have to build one interface. You again, sort of assuming that your software as a service, because most people are these days, you as a software company can submit data on behalf of multiple customers over the same interface, and that will maintain HIPAA compliance and access and all of that appropriately, but you only have to build the one interface. Do you want me to carry on, or do you want to do this one?
Yeah, but you're pretty much, I'm just kind of clicking as you're going.
Beautiful. We are going to send you so that attestation is basically you saying, "Yep, we know what to do," and "Yep, we're going to do this properly." Okay, we're not going to do workarounds. Again, if we've got something we're not sure about, we'll talk to therapy, and we're going to do this properly, and we understand what we're supposed to be doing. We will also send you a bunch of stuff which our lawyers wrote. We really, really, really do not want to have it's not really a negotiating position. We've done them. The state of Kentucky's agreed to them. It's basically where it's at, and it's going to significantly delay and possibly add cost if you want to start negotiating them. They are basically industry standard across the way that these things go. So it's going to be a lot easier for everybody if you just sign those when they come to it. And again, as you're thinking about it, as you're signing all of these, that point that I made earlier, bear in mind that you've got to be able to prove in person that you can actually do all this stuff the way we are expecting it to be done. I would add the expectation there is, and if you've worked with other aggregators, the bit that I like, one of the bits that I like most about the therapy aggregator is there is no portal for people to log in and change their data. Okay. It's completely appropriate for you to want to change data in the aggregator. Again, the idea that somebody had a visit which they didn't check out for, you can update that in the aggregator, but you do it over the API. Absolutely all the communication that you do with the aggregator will be over that API. You will have a login, but the login is to allow you to look at the data that you've submitted, see how we have aggregated it, I guess would be, particularly when it comes to rolling up and comparing to claims. Then eventually you're going to be able to see which of those visits were paid for and which weren't. You'll be able to see that in there. But again, when you're designing this interface and thinking about programming it, remember it's got to do all the functionality that's in there. It's not just a one-time submit and then users are going to log into a portal to do the updates. All of the changes stay there, which is really good, because what that means is on an ongoing basis, what's in your system, be that Theraps EVV or your third-party EVV, your own EVV, it's always in sync between that and the aggregator. So if something's going wrong, you're going to be able to look at your own data and know why it was wrong. The other one thing I would make one quick comment on here, Beverly, again, to people who have done EVV perhaps in other states or even on the personal care side of things, and Beverly mentioned this at the beginning, you'll have noticed when we talked about the aggregator, we've not talked about claims at all. And that is deliberate, because we don't want to mess up your billing process. You guys are Medicaid providers. You know how to send claims, whether it's to the MMIS or to one of the MCOs. You're going to carry on doing that the same way you've always done it. Okay. What's going to happen, though, is the submission of that claim is going to be what triggers the matching with the data that's in the MMIS. So again, what you need to do is before you submit that claim for the visit, you've checked that there's good data in the aggregator to substantiate the visit. But your billing processes can carry on as they were before, unless you happen not to have a way to do that, in which case you're more than welcome to use Theraps billing solution, which is tied into EVV. Again, I don't quite understand how somebody would not do their billing and their EVV out of the same system, because they're going to end up getting matched again at the far end. But that's up to you to do and work out how your business processes work.
All right. So before we go on to the BAA, is there any points you didn't hit, Justin, that you feel like you need to?
I believe I have touched on all the major things I thought I wanted to touch on.
I'm sorry?
I think I'm done with all my main
Okay.
points that I wanted to make.
All right, so the business associate agreement is the second set of documents, and this is the exact same document. One is sent to the service provider and one is sent to the EVV vendor. If you are a service provider and you have multiple legal entities, then you have to do one of these per legal entity. If you are a EVV vendor, then you only have to do this once. So and I'm not going to use any actual names. So if ABC vendor supports 8 different providers in the state of Kentucky, they only need to do this document once. They don't need to do it 8 different times per providers, as opposed to the attestation that we were just talking about. That has to be done once for every provider that EVV vendor supports. And so that business associate agreement basically allows for the data sharing, sets the terms of how our business agreement works, which is very related to the next document, which is the third-party aggregator agreement, you may hear that referred to as a EULA, end user legal agreement. And so much like I just described the other one, this document needs to be signed once per legal entity. So if you are a large corporation and you're legally all one entity and the same guy signs for everything, then you only have to do this once. If you are a corporation that has 5 distinct legal entities under you, then you will need to sign this 5 different times. So for the EVV vendor, again, similar document, but they only need to sign it once. It doesn't matter if they support 8 different providers across the state of Kentucky. They only need to sign it once for us. And so in the interest of time and other stuff that needs to get covered today, we are not getting into a whole lot of detail on this. We figured that the group was more interested in what they had to do to communicate with the aggregator. But all 3 of these documents, if you have indicated to Therap that you are interested in using a third-party vendor, you should already have had all of these. And if you don't, it's because there was either a cross in communication lines or we haven't heard from you. So I would refer back to that slide earlier today of if you have not heard from us, or if based on this presentation you have questions and you might be changing your mind, just reach out to us and we'll make sure you're on the right path. We've already talked a little bit about this for the aggregator and the AP aspects. We are happy to share that. There is a testing environment, which Justin is more capable of speaking to than I am, but I will say that before an EVV vendor can have access to that testing requirements, we do require that those 3 prior agreements that we were just referring to are signed from a legal perspective before we can start any testing or anything like that. Justin, do you have anything to chime into that?
That was all good.
All righty. And with that, I am going to stop sharing and I am going to turn it over to Ms. Sarah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Christensen, and I will be working with the vendors on the testing process. So what I would like to speak to you about today is some of the data elements that will be required for individuals and users specifically, and just some clarification about what our testing process is going to look like. All right, so regarding individual information that vendors need to be able to submit on behalf of providers, this is all really very standard information that any EVV system might be required to report. So if you are a vendor who has gone through this type of process before, this should all look very familiar. So of course you need to be able to report individual names. Individual Medicaid ID is how we uniquely identify that individual. And then there are some additional data elements such as date of birth, address, and geolocation information associated with the visit. Okay. The user information, we of course need to be able to collect staff first and last name, middle is optional. And then the staff ID is where you may have some more questions and need some clarification. So I'm going to go to the next slide where we have additional details regarding that. So for the staff ID, that is going to consist of a combination of the social security number of the staff and their first name. So the result is basically you do not need to send a full social security number. You're able to send just partial. So if there's a couple different ways that might look. First, if the staff's name is 3 letters or longer, you'll have the first 3 letters of that staff name followed by the last 4 of their social security number. And we have some examples on the screen. So if the staff's name is John Smith and SSN is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the EVV staff ID for that user would be JOH6789. Now, if the staff's first name is shorter, you can see the example here where you're basically replacing where those characters would be with a letter Z. So if we have Ed Smith, his EVV staff ID would be EDZ 9898, for example. Now, how those get generated is really up to each vendor in terms of how specifically they handle that in their systems. But every vendor who goes through testing with us will need to be able to, either generate these, have providers enter them, so that those can be sent via the interface. Okay. Regarding the testing process, as soon as we receive all of those signed agreements that Beverly spoke about, then we can move forward with the testing process with that vendor. So the vendor will receive a welcome letter from Therap with their Swagger API credentials, a copy of the third-party specification, and business case requirements that they will be required to demonstrate as they send us test files. So as those test files are submitted, the vendors will complete this checklist and note the UID associated with their submission. And, which UID demonstrates each of the business requirements that we have as part of our third-party specification. So we'll then review our UAT system to confirm that all of those were met. And once we confirm that, then we will contact, So we'll contact the vendor and the provider, letting them know that testing has successfully been completed. And then when we are ready to do so, then we would issue production credentials that would be used by the provider. All right. Are there any questions regarding that? So I think I can turn this back over to Jason.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Beverly and Justin, for going over all of that information. Hopefully that helped answer a few questions for some of you guys. I know there are likely some questions in particular around the Social Security number requirement that Sarah mentioned there. So I want to address that, but I want to address it as part of kind of our broader frequently asked questions. So we've tried to cover, kind of giving you a broad overview of the questions related to the user agreements and the paperwork that needs to be signed, as well as the testing process. What I want to do now is kind of walk back through some of the questions that we've received in some of our past town halls, and also direct you guys to some resources for any additional questions that you may have. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. But what we've tried to do is with each of these, we try to answer as many questions as we can through the chat and through the Q&A. But for those that we can't, we compile them and put them together and post them. And here's some of the questions that have come in over the course of the last couple of weeks that we heard consistently. So I wanted to pass on this information to you. For those of you that are putting information into the Therap platform, there's been a question around, is there a way to import some of this information, specifically information about the individuals that you're supporting via Excel? And the answer is yes. We do have mechanisms for importing both individual information as well as user and staff information. If that's the approach you'd like to take, you can certainly discuss that. Our support team is happy to assist you with that and show you the process. But yes, we can certainly do that to expedite things. There was a question regarding whether or not the Therap application can be left open so that staff do not have to constantly log in and log out to document their services. For security purposes, we do set it up such that our application will automatically log out a user after a specified period of time, simply because, as it says here, for the security of the information, making sure folks aren't accidentally documenting under another person's name or things like that. We do have that auto logout feature. However, the parameters of that and the specific time element can be adjusted by a super administrator within the account. There is a provider preferences part of each account where you can adjust how that particular piece works. We have a question around whether users will be able to change their own password once their account is set up. Well, better than being able to, they will be required to. Part of the security that we provide is that whenever a new user is set up within the account, the first time that they log in, they are required to reset their password to a password of their own that only they know. And so that is part of that initial onboarding process for any new user in the system. And then again, a user would have the ability to go in and adjust their password at any time going forward from there. Getting to our topic of the day, third-party vendor and agreements. We've had a couple of additional questions come in. If we work with a third-party agreement, when should we expect to receive the credentials and training access to the aggregator? I think this was covered pretty well by our presenters earlier, but just to reiterate, first of all, we are happy to provide the specifications for linking to the aggregator upon request. Again, as Beverly said earlier, our primary request is that it does come from the provider and not from the vendor. Certainly nothing against our vendor friends out there. We're one too. But in order for us to manage the information sharing and who's involved with who, we do request that we're going to continue to work through our providers to get to you. So if, as a provider, if your vendor would like those API, those specs ahead of time, please let us know. We'll be happy to share that information out. And again, in terms of the testing credentials themselves, which Sarah will be working with you guys on, those will be provided after the completion of the BAA end user agreement and the aggregator attestation. Again, what documents are required for providers using a third-party platform? These have been covered several times today and in past town halls, but I keep it up here because I know a lot of folks are interested. So I want to make sure you have it as a reference. Again, you will need the BAA, the EULA, and the aggregator attestation. Now, to probably the question of the day, we've had a lot of folks ask about the requirement for the Social Security number. And first of all, why is that required? As Sarah mentioned, and I know we've discussed on some previous calls, each of the staff out there, we require the two elements, the name of the individual and the social, or the name of the user, I should say, the staff member and the social, to be able to create a unique identifier for folks within the Therap aggregator. And so after some discussion, we know that there's been a challenge. We know we've had some staff out there that weren't completely comfortable with putting in their full aggregator. We've had some discussions with the state, and what we are able to do, as Sarah mentioned earlier, is to accept a partial social in terms of the last four, rather than staff being required to put in their entire Social Security number. You can put in the last four. It will require leading zeros. The field within our application is designed to accept 9 digits, as is a typical social number, but you can put in leading zeros. You can see an example of what that would look like here on your screen with the 000-00-1234 for the social. You can certainly go in and put that information as well. Part of the reason, though, that we do need that to utilize the social is, as I said, we need a unique identifier that identifies specifically who this person is, and we have to be able to verify that distinction and the uniqueness of each person. And so that was the original agreement that we came to, is that we would use the social, but we are happy to offer this partial option for being able to only put in the last four. So please feel free to do so, and certainly our support team will be happy to help you with that as you're going through the onboarding process. A couple of other questions that have come in. If I know there are a handful of you guys out there that provide both personal care services as well as home health care services. And so the question is, will you have to utilize both Therap and NetSmart? And so while we will ultimately be the vendor of record for both personal care and as well as home health, given kind of the transition as we're moving over from phase 1 into phase 2, there will be a temporary period for which EVV for personal care will continue to be done through NetSmart, your current vendor. This will transition to Therap next year in 2024 as part of phase 2, and we'll obviously be supporting the transition from personal care over much in the same way that we've been working with our home health folks to this point. A couple of questions around other options in Therap beyond EVV. If you have any questions about our application beyond what's available through the state contract, please contact us directly through the contact site here. We obviously are focused on the work of the state contract. That's where we're dedicating our energies. If you have interested in information out that, please use this particular channel to submit them, and we'll address your particular questions in that way. But certainly as part of this process, we want to focus on those pieces of the state contract that are required. Again, as I mentioned before, we've gone over these questions in all of our town halls, and we are collecting them and making them available to you guys on our Kentucky-specific EVV site that is available through our therapservices.net. Got the link here. Most of you guys have hopefully seen this before, but if you have not, you can get to a lot of resources associated with EVV. Obviously, you're here today, so hopefully you've got the registration link for our town hall, but we've embedded that there. We've got a lot of courses and other information associated with EVV here. We've got recordings of all of our town hall meetings, as well as the slides. We're trying to get those posted as quickly after the town halls as we can. Some other training guides that are available here that you guys can click on and then link over to the user guides associated. But per the original question, we also are collecting those frequently asked questions here. We tried to categorize them for easy access, but as you scroll down here, you'll be able to click on the particular topic and get the questions. Where appropriate, we've also tried to embed links directly to user guides so you can get additional information around training and utilization of different parts of the system. So we encourage you guys to check out that information. And then last but not least, on this page, should you need it as a reference point, we're also showing what are the current service codes for home health for which EVV is required here as part of phase 1. Obviously, once we transition to phase 2 with personal care, we'll update this information as needed, but this is what is required as of now. So hopefully that addressed the majority of the questions that you guys have. Again, we're going to go back through all the Q&A that's coming in through the Zoom platform and compile that information and get it posted to that very site that you just saw a moment ago. We'll try to have that up over the course of the next few days so that you can refer to those answers. Again, I've already spoken about the training resources that we have, but again, here's some information about the kinds of things that you'll find there. So we'll continue to leave this slide in for reference. And we also want to let you guys know in your planning what's coming up on our town halls over the course of the next few weeks so that you can plan accordingly. Next week, 1 week from today, next Wednesday, November the 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern, and our next town hall, we're really going to focus more on actual training of utilization of the system. So things around overall schedule administration within the Therapy EVV platform and the specifics of what caregivers need to know in terms of how to access the platform through our mobile application, the logging in, the logging out, the checking in, the checking out, the schedule edits, and all of those pieces associated with using our EVV platform. And again, just as with everything else, we will show you that information here. We will also be recording that information so that you'll be able to reference it, to be able to share it with your staff as well going forward. The following week, November the 15th, our plan is to focus more on the billing side of things. Again, just to make sure folks understand, it is an optional service that you have available to you should you choose to bill directly through the Therap platform, submit your claims. That is being made available to you. So if you're choosing to use Therap's EVV platform and would like to bill through our platform as well and submit your claims. This particular town hall is going to be focused on the setup of that process and everything associated with submitting those claims. We're going to have our billing specialist, Kelly Galloway, join us to kind of go over that process with you. So that's what we've got coming up over the course of the next couple of weeks. As you can see here, we've got several town halls left. We're going to continue to do these on a weekly basis between now and the end of the year to make sure that you guys are getting the information that you need. So we encourage you to continue to attend as you can, and we'll continue to get these resources posted for you so that you can be able to access them going forward. With that, I think we've covered pretty much all of the information that as a team on the Therap side we wanted to cover. I will ask our friends in Kentucky if there's any particular information that you guys would like to share with our attendees before we close out the call for this week.
Okay. Go ahead, Pam. I was just going to say thank you for everybody that's attended. Encourage you, please, again, to reach out to the resources that are in the presentation. Onboarding, of course, we're at critical levels for that now, whether it is that you're going to use a third party or you're going to use Therap as your vendor. But if you're having problems or questions, please reach out to either one or both of the email addresses included in the presentation to get to Therap staff or to Medicaid staff.
All right. Thank you, Pam. And again, thank you to all of you guys. Thank you to my co-presenters at Therap. We do appreciate you guys spending the time with us this afternoon. And as always, certainly as there are questions, please reach out to us at kysupport@therapservices.net. And we look forward to working directly with you and seeing you about the same time next week. Thanks, everyone.